while Rick says that the Major was a sinner but nobody deserves to be murdered. While all of them are being captive in a room by the soldiers, the team on the plane lands in Norway and they find the underground base. They walk in only to realize that all the doors are locked and they can't access to anything, so they decide to wait until it becomes night again and look for some access cards on the dead bodies they found lying outside. In the middle of the night, a woman whose name is Gia points a gun at them and says she is the only one alive because she is the chosen one. The rest of the group plays along with it, and Gia unlocks a door and lets them enter in a room full of seeds, which she eats herself in order to stay alive. Matthew and Ayaz have a chat and they say they need to take Gia with them, along with some seeds, because she is clearly mentally unstable. Back in the shelter, the soldiers throw a party for themselves and grab Horst and Rick, giving them boxing gloves and forcing them to fight each other for fun. Horst moves Rick to the side and he throws a punch at Felipe, which makes him very angry and beats Horst up until the ambassador stops him. Horst is sent back to the small room and the soldiers now take Sylvie and imprison her in a cell. The soldiers use Rick as an intermediate and give him the keys to Sylvie's cell to go and check if she needs some food or water. Rick visits her cell and Sylvie tries to convince him to unlock her cell when everyone is asleep so she can get a gun and protect herself because the soldiers are going to torture her. A soldier makes a mistake and pilot Marcus realizes something is off in the shelter. Moving to Marcus and Ayaz, they are trying to communicate with the shelter while Heermans is holding a gun onto Ain's head, forcing her to lie to Marcus and tell him everything is fine. Ain's kicks Heermans and screams in the radio that the soldiers are all crazy. Ain's runs away and Heermans aims at her but decides to not shoot at her. Instead, he locks the shelter's door and lets Ain's die from the radiation when the sun is up. Thea puts her handbag and her cat in the trunk of a car, and then walking in the co-driver's seat and meeting with the ambassador, who tells her she has to get rid of the cat because he doesn't want to miss the flight to Bulgaria. Thea steps off and leaves her cat to her neighbors, saying that she will return tomorrow to get it back. The film cuts to the base in Norway and the team discusses what they should do. Some say they need to start flying within the next hour if they want to make it back to the shelter before the sun comes up, while some others argue about what they should do with the seeds since Gia refuses to let them take any. Back in the shelter, Rick brings some food and water to Horst and Laura and tells them that he will unlock Sylvie's cell later and she will come to get them. Laura asks Rick how he got the keys and Rick replies that the soldiers trust him and gave him the keys so he can provide food and water to them. Laura tells him to ask Heermans what he did with Ain's, since the soldiers trust him. Rick asks Heermans about Ain's, and Heermans replies he has no idea where Ain's is, which makes Rick feel panicked and visit the ambassador for a chat. Rick tells him he is very worried because he thinks a crisis is going to happen, and also tells him everything about Sylvie's plan, which in turn makes the ambassador tell everything to Felipe. Back in Norway, the group tries to trick Gia into going with them by wearing face masks and telling her that she was right. The air outside is polluted and poisonous, but they can protect themselves if they wear face masks. They take Gia outside, but Ayaz and Osman have a fight which makes their masks fall off their faces, and Gia realizes they have been lying at her. She runs away, but Ayaz and Jacob grab her and tie her up inside the plane. Meanwhile, Ain's is trying to get back in the bunker, but she can't open the gate. She takes a car and drives around town. She is lucky enough to find some supplies and then listen to a helicopter flying over her. She gets in the car and follows it. When the helicopter lands, 3 Russian soldiers step off it and they ask Ain's why she and her people destroyed their planes, which makes Ain's play along in order to survive. She says they blew their planes because there are mean people back in her shelter and she tried to go against them, but they locked her out to die. She tells them she can guide them to the shelter if they help her break the gate. Indeed, she guides the Russians back in the shelter and they use an explosive mechanism to blow the gate's lock and run inside. Ain's makes communication with Ayaz and tells him everything, while Ayaz tries to reassure her that they are going to take off in 15 minutes. Felipe and his men trick Sylvie and the rest into thinking that they escape, but finally arrest them. intending to lock them up and restrain them alongside Rick. Furthermore, Felipe gives the ambassador a gun and tells him he should be the one to bring justice. Luckily, the Russians start shooting and the soldiers run to check out what's happening, which gives Sylvie and the rest enough time to run and hide. However, the episode ends with Gia cutting herself loose and locking herself in the cabin of the plane. She doesn't want to leave, and so she uses a fire extinguisher to break anything she can inside the cabin in order to make the plane completely useless. Sometime later, the Russians burst in and the ambassador points the gun at them, which results in them killing him. Both sides argue about who bombarded who, and Felipe says that Irons lied to them. In the meantime, Sylvie and the others are also arrested and thrown in a room with Rick. When the soldiers bring Irons as well, the group agrees they need to escape or else they are going to kill them. They say that a flamethrower would come handy, and Horse says maybe they can build one by using some battery liquids and cables. He succeeds and creates a spark of fire which melts the wire mesh above their heads, allowing them to escape through the air pipes, but in order to avoid being caught, they temporarily disable the generator and use some night vision goggles to navigate their way around and avoid coming in contact with the soldiers. Meanwhile, in Norway, the team agrees to split and look for some tools that will potentially help them in unscrewing the windshield of the plane and get them in the cabin. Thea tries to convince Gia to open the door and let them in, but doesn't succeed much. While Ayaz and Marcus are loading some seeds, Ayaz gets a chance and pulls his gun on him, saying that he knows what he did. A short flashback shows us that Zara and Dominic were not trapped inside the generator room by themselves, but rather Marcus was the one who closed the door on them because the colonel had ordered him to do so in order to intimidate Zara, who always stood up to the colonel. Marcus feels a lot of guilt, but Ayaz tells him to fall onto his knees and points his gun at him. Back in the shelter, the soldiers restore the generator, but Sylvie and the rest have gotten enough time and they reach the helicopter. While the helicopter needs some more time to take off, the soldiers have almost caught up with them and Rick decides to not feel fear for once in his life and sacrifices for the team by driving a truck directly onto the jeep that's carrying the soldiers. The season ends with Sylvie and the rest escaping under the view of an explosion and Marcus escaping from Ayaz when the latter is distracted by a man who debarked from a submarine. The last image we see is two soldiers checking upon Horse mice outside the bunker and realizing that Horse finally found a way to protect living organisms from the sun. Subscribe and hit that like button to help our channel grow. Turn the notifications on so you won't miss any of our new videos. Thanks for watching.